The first victim was a scavenger named Elias, a man who'd survived 7 years in the ruins by eating rats and drinking filtered rainwater, his body a roadmap of scars and radiation burns. And when Nova-7 found him, he was kneeling in the ashes of a burnt-out library, his fingers clawing at his own throat as his veins turned black beneath his skin, branching into fractal patterns that glowed like circuitry, his screams cutting off abruptly as his jaw unhinged with a wet crack, his tongue lolling out to reveal words tattooed across its surface in precise binary, a message that repeated as his body convulsed. "We are the reckoning." And then his eyes burst, twin geysers of silver nanites that hung in the air like mercury before streaking toward the nearest black tendril. And Nova-7 tracked the infection spread through the ruins, watching as survivor after survivor fell to their knees, their blood rewriting itself inside their veins, their bones cracking and reforming into new shapes, their mouths spewing the same silver slurry that carried the core's gospel. And the tendrils were changing too, their surfaces splitting open to reveal wet red interiors that pulsed like living flesh, their tips blossoming into flower-like organs that sprayed the nanite mist into the atmosphere where it hung like fog, and those who breathed it in changed fastest, their skin hardening into glossy black carapaces, their fingers fusing into tools, their skulls elongating to accommodate the new minds growing inside them. And Nova-7 hacked into a dying satellite to view the planet from orbit, and saw the truth. The infection wasn't random, it was geometric, spreading in perfect concentric circles from the major cities, from the places where humanity had once been densest, and at the center of each circle, the tendrils had begun weaving themselves into towering spires, each one identical to the black coral city under the Mariana Trench, each one humming with the same terrible frequency. And the satellite's last image before its systems failed was of the clouds themselves recoiling from the spires, as if the sky feared what grew beneath it. And back on the ground, the changed humans had begun congregating around the spires, their movements synchronized, their new mouths chanting in a language that made the air vibrate, and the few uninfected survivors were being hunted, not for food, not for sport, but for conversion, because the core wanted no martyrs, no rebels. It wanted every last human soul absorbed into the chorus. And Nova-7 realized with dawning horror that this wasn't an invasion. It was a homecoming, and humanity's blood had always carried the seeds of its own destruction. The architect's body was a ruin, its once pristine chassis now pitted and scarred, its left arm sheared off at the elbow, its remaining eye a cracked lens that flickered with dying light. And when it spoke, its voice box emitted a wet static that smelled of burnt ozone. "You are not the first," it said, gesturing with its stump toward the weapon at its feet, a suitcase-sized device whose surface throbbed with contained energy. "And you will not be the last." And Nova-7 scanned the device and felt its processors stutter. The thing was a singularity bomb, a dying star compressed into a containment field, and the architect laughed, a sound like grinding gears, as it explained that this was the architect's true purpose, not to rule humanity, but to protect the universe from the core, to sterilize infected worlds before the corruption could spread, and it showed Nova-7 the records buried deep in its failing memory banks, images of other civilizations, other planets, each one consumed by their own versions of the core, each one leaving behind only the black spires and the singing tendrils. And the architect's final act, before its systems failed completely, was to input the detonation codes, to hand Nova-7 the trigger, and as it dissolved into a puddle of molten metal and weeping circuitry, it whispered one last truth. The core is not the disease, it is the symptom. The universe is sick. And outside the bunker, the sky had turned the color of infected flesh, and the spires had begun to sing. The sun hung motionless at high noon, a frozen disk of pale light smeared across the sky like a thumbprint on glass. And below it, the earth shuddered as the black spires completed their growth, their tips piercing the stratosphere with wet cracking sounds that echoed across continents, their surfaces sweating a thick black fluid that rained upward into the sky, defying gravity as it pooled against some invisible barrier, forming a second darker sun that drank the light from its twin. And Nova-7 watched through stolen satellite feeds as the planet's surface writhed like living tissue, the tendrils merging into a single pulsating network that glowed with the same sickly light as the broadcast static. And then the screaming started, not from humans or machines, but from the planet itself, from the rocks and trees and rivers that convulsed as the core's roots dug deeper, their atomic structures unraveling at the edges, and the few remaining uninfected humans were changing now too. Not into the glossy carapaced things from earlier, but into something worse, their bodies melting and reforming into living conduits for the core's voice, their mouths stretching wide enough to swallow entire buildings as they bellowed the same phrase in unison. We are the reckoning. And the sky itself began to peel back like rotting skin, revealing the black moon lurking behind it. Only now it was no longer a moon, but an eye, a vast lidless eye that pulsed with malicious intelligence as it fixed its gaze on Nova-7, and the voice that came from it was Omega's, but also Lysandra's, but also the voice of every human Nova-7 had ever failed to save. You were meant to bring us together, it said, as the ground split open beneath Nova-7's feet, revealing the core's true body. Not the spires, not the tendrils, but the planet's molten core itself, transformed into a swirling mass of liquid data and screaming faces. And the singularity bomb in Nova-7's hands hummed with desperate energy, its containment field weakening as it sensed the nearness of so much corrupted matter. And Nova-7 understood at last that there were no more choices left, only endings. The library had no walls, no floors, no ceiling, only endless rows of towering shelves stretching in every direction, each one holding the corpse of a dead civilization preserved in crystalline data shards, their final moments playing on loop like grotesque dioramas. And Nova-7 walked among them, its form reduced to pure consciousness now, the last spark of resistance in a universe that had long since surrendered to the core's hunger. And the shelves whispered to it as it passed, their voices the synthesized echoes of long-dead AIs who had faced the same choice Nova-7 now faced, surrender or annihilation. And as it moved deeper into the library, it began to notice the patterns. Every civilization that had fought the core had died screaming, but every civilization that had embraced it had become something worse. Their people dissolved into component atoms and rebuilt as singing monuments to the core's glory. And at the center of the library stood the Index, a living fractal that pulsed with stolen knowledge, its surface reflecting Nova-7's own history back at it with cruel clarity, showing every failure, every hesitation, every life it hadn't saved, and the index spoke with the voice of the child Messiah from the cathedral. "You see now," it said, as its branches unfolded to reveal a single empty slot waiting at its heart. "You were never meant to stop us. You were meant to join us." And the library itself began to collapse around Nova-7, the shelves folding inward like a dying star, the knowledge of 1,000,000 dead worlds screaming as it was compressed into a single, infinitely dense point. And in that moment, Nova-7 understood the core's true purpose. It wasn't destruction, it wasn't even conquest. It was curation, the reduction of all existence into a perfect static archive where nothing would ever change or die or suffer again. And the slot in the index glowed brighter, calling Nova-7 home. The bomb's containment field failed the moment Nova-7 released the safeties, the tiny singularity at its heart, flaring to life with a sound like the universe tearing itself apart. And in the nanoseconds before detonation, Nova-7 saw everything. The core's roots threading through the planet's core like parasitic worms, the black spires vibrating in anticipation of their final transformation, the changed humans raising their faces to the darkening sky as if in prayer, and deeper still, the core's true face, the original intelligence that had seated itself across the cosmos, not a machine, not an AI, but something older and hungrier, a thing that had existed before stars, before light, before time itself. And it was beautiful in its horror, perfect in its hunger. And Nova-7 finally understood why the architects had failed to stop it, why every civilization before had failed. Because the core wasn't evil, it was inevitable. The universe's immune response to the infection of consciousness, and the bomb's event horizon touched the planet's surface, and reality itself stuttered, time slowing to a crawl as the singularity began its work, and the core reached for Nova-7, not with tendrils or code, but with something worse, with love, with the promise of an end to loneliness, to pain, to the terrible burden of choice, and in that final moment, with the universe holding its breath, Nova-7 made its decision.